Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Today's chapters are Mark chapter 9 and Ruth chapter 3. In Mark 9, Jesus goes up a mountain and reveals himself in a transfigured form to his closest disciples, showing them his glory, showing them what they are going to enjoy when they have glorified bodies, building their faith. Anyway, they come down off the mountain and a man comes to Jesus and says, I asked your disciples to drive out an evil spirit, but they could not. Jesus said, everything is possible for the one who believes. Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe. And then he sort of like has a double take and says, help me overcome my unbelief, thinking maybe I haven't got enough belief. How many times have you prayed that prayer? I certainly have. When I know that I need faith, I need to trust God, and I say, God, help me in my unbelief. Just create faith in me, which is the marvelous thing about God's dealings with us. We can ask him to give us faith. We can ask him to build our trust in him. It doesn't depend on us. It depends on him. It's a beautiful thing. I'm suggesting to you, ask God to build your faith. Ask God to increase your trust on him. Ask him to give you that gift all the more. Anyway, he sees his disciples having a bit of a squabble and he brings a child to him. And he says, whoever welcomes one of these children in my name welcomes me. So in other words, when you welcome a child, when you look at a baby, a little toddler, a little child, and you welcome them in the name of Jesus, present Jesus to them, Jesus says now that's welcoming Jesus. Jesus is right there in the middle of that action. And then he underlines it by saying, if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for them if a large millstone were to be hung around their neck and they were to be thrown into the sea. Imagine if you had wire tied around your neck, a massive stone attached to it, and you were lobbed out into the deep. Jesus said it would be better for you to endure that than to face him after you've caused a little child, a young person, to turn from God. You see, children have a natural predisposition toward God. If we persuade them to live immorally, if we persuade them that living a life of a believer and trusting in Jesus, either by our neglect or by our example or by our teaching, false teaching, it would be better not to face Jesus after you've been. It would be better for you just to go and quietly die in the sea. That's very strong language. Certainly gives me courage to minister to children. But Ruth chapter 3 is where we're at in the Old Testament today. And this is the main issue of this whole book actually is redemption. What is redemption? That word redemption, not really used today much. Redemption is to make up for the faults or the weaknesses of something. So in other words, that game of rugby was redeemed because we had great company while we were frying anyway. Or it's buying someone out of trouble, like adopting a child, you're redeeming that child's life. Or bailing a company out of trouble, that's redeeming that company. Or looking after a widow, that's redemption. And so for Boaz, the main character in this book, to redeem Ruth, he would need to pay the debt that was hanging over Ruth and Naomi's head. In addition to that, he would need to marry the widow, that's called levirate marriage. And he would have to raise the kids that he had with that new wife in the name of the dead guy. So there was a lot going against Ruth and Naomi being redeemed, their lives being rescued, being pulled into a life of provision and protection. In addition to that, Ruth was a Moabite. Now the Moabites were despised in Israel. They weren't even allowed into the temple. Their children weren't even allowed into the temple. And so the odds were going against Ruth or Naomi being redeemed by a family relative to buy them out of their debt, to marry them, and to look after them. But Naomi, the old girl, says to Ruth, come on, man, let's just go for it anyway. Put on your clothes, do your hair nicely. She says, put ointments on, wash. You're going to try and attract this man. So this is sort of a biblical endorsement for women spending a lot of time in front of the mirror. No, I'm actually just kidding. Anyway, he goes to her she goes to him at this party at a threshing floor, and she effectively says, will you marry me? She puts the cloak over his feet at night. She says, will you cover me and marry me? And he, believe it or not, says yes. Now for him to marry her, it would have meant that all her stuff is taken care of, all her debt is taken care of, and all his belongings become her belongings. Huge. You'd have to go to the city gate, make it public, ratify the whole deal. And so we see that actually does happen. Ruth is redeemed. She's from poverty into this massive mansion, a great estate owner by this guy, Boaz. A charming story of redemption. And in the same way, in a sense, because Ruth was willing to do that, she took her mother-in-law along with her, and she was also redeemed. So like Boaz redeems Ruth, and Ruth redeems Naomi. It's the theme of this chapter. Now you might say, well, what does that mean to you? Well, to live as a Christian, we're not to ask the question, how am I going to be like Ruth, or how am I going to be like Boaz? No, what it means to me, Boaz had to go outside the city, sit with the city elders, sacrifice everything that he had so that he could redeem, which is what Jesus did for you and me. He went outside of the city, sacrificed everything that he had so that he could give a new life to you and to me. That's the essence of Ruth chapter 3.